Hi and welcome to the unbox and overview of this Seiko Presage. Included with the box are an instruction manual, a nice thick instruction manual with instructions in English, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Greek and Japanese. So a good wide array of languages there. Also included in a plastic wallet is the Worldwide Guarantee and Instruction Book containing various bits of pieces of information in various languages, much like the instruction book, and the Worldwide Guarantee card in the back of the book. So we'll get those out of the way. The box itself is a nice white presentation box. Lifting the lid of that presents the actual watch box, so we'll get those out of the way. And the watch box itself is it's a lovely material. It's a synthetic covering of some sort, but with a really nice smooth shark skin kind of feel. Opening the box, laying full length inside, is the gorgeous Seiko Presage SSA401J1 automatic watch. And we're going to scoot in closer and take a look at the watch in detail. And here is the star of the show, the Seiko Presage dress watch. And the Seiko Presage is a range of watches I have looked at in the past several times, but none of them have ever really jumped out and appealed to me. And this is no slight on the watch itself, because they are very good watches. And the reason for this is because my personal preference is for rugged, everyday sports style watches, and in particular dive watches. My second preference are for chronographs, such as this Citizen Bullhead that I'm wearing today, both being sports style, rugged, stainless steel, everyday watches, and it's just what I like. And as you'll know, watch collecting is a very personal thing, and different people like different things, which is good, because if we all like the same thing, it would be a bit of a boring world. But occasionally a watch from a different genre jumps out and appeals to me, and in this case this one did the moment I saw that dial. Now, isn't that quite possibly the most beautiful dial you have ever seen in your life? It's gorgeous, not just the creamy coffee colour, but the texture as well, which you will see in much better detail when we have a close-up look around the watch. It's utterly, utterly beautiful, and I fell in love with it the moment I saw it. And I knew I had to have one. This particular one, the SSA401J1, is one of 1,000 pieces, limited edition. There is another model, the serial number of which I don't know off the top of my head, but instead of the sub-dial date here, it has a date window at 3 and doesn't have the power reserve indicator. And that particular one is 1,000 of is a series of 1,500 limited edition pieces. And the name given to this watch, we'll just briefly mention names. As you Seiko collectors will know, the Japanese love their model number designations, and I guess it does solve any kind of awkward lost in translation namings and what have you. But in the West, especially in the US, they're very fond of names, and you can see this with Japanese vehicles, and a lot of Japanese vehicles just have serial number model number designations, but in the US they will have names. And you'll be familiar, of course, with names like the Tuner and the Monster and so on and so forth. I don't pretend to know them all. I do like Seikos, but I'm not a huge Seiko buff. So, you know, I know more about watches and movements than the actual models and designations and years and such. But the name given to this one, I have a little bit of a gripe, a little bit of a bone of contention with, because the name given to this one is the Irish Coffee. Now, whoever named this clearly has never seen an Irish coffee in their life, because this is an Irish coffee. Now you'll note its most distinguishing feature is that it resembles the very, very well-known Irish export, Guinness. It has a black body, a creamy white head, and what makes it an Irish coffee, possibly a little bit unfairly to the Irish, is the addition of alcohol in the form of whiskey. There's nothing on here that looks vaguely like an Irish coffee. This does, however, resemble another coffee, that being a latte. Now, those of you who know my channel and who have looked back on my history, you'll know I'm something of a coffee obsessive. I roast my own coffee beans. I have a passion for coffee and all of the ways that it can be prepared, and it is my favourite beverage of all time. So it's, you know, it kind of irks me a little bit, this one, and it's a personal thing. But as you can see, this is a latte. And if you see this and compare them to both of these pictures, you'll note that this closely resembles a latte and doesn't resemble in the slightest an Irish coffee. Therefore, I will be referring to this as my Seiko Latte. Thank you very much. So there we go. I don't doubt for 1 minute that the rest of the Seiko community and the rest of the world will continue to refer to it as the Irish coffee, but not this one. What we're going to do now is scoot in really tight and get a good close-up look at, in particular, the dial, but the whole of the watch, and then I'm going to give that a wind so that we can see the operation of the power reserve needle, which should swing nice and smoothly up to the full reserve of 40 hours, I believe that is. Let's take a close-up look at the, oh wait, let's just move that delicious looking latte out of the way. Here we are up close with the Presage, and first of all I'm just going to show you the simplicity of the quick release spring bars. You can see I've already removed the top strap, and these are absolutely fantastic if you have a preference for regularly changing straps on your watches. It has a little protruding lug there, which is large enough to get a fingernail on, but small enough that you're not going to accidentally catch it. You simply pull that back and you just twist away your watch, and the spring bar stays in place, of course, because of the protruding lug. Now, I've saved this bit specially because I know there are those among you who particularly like this part of an unboxing. Who am I kidding? We all love it. Here up close in greater detail is that beautiful, beautiful latte coloured dial, and hopefully you will be able to see on the video more of the texture that I referred to of that dial in addition to the colour. It's a little tricky. I'm trying to get that so that there's not too many reflections on the crystal for you. You can see how the hands and the indices are very beautifully made and really nicely finished, and the raised Seiko logo, of course, and they all catch the light really pleasingly. But that dial is just beautiful. Look at that, absolutely gorgeous. And the stem is pulled out to the hand setting position currently to stop the seconds hand. We're now going to give that a wind and observe the power reserve indicator, which should, and is, gliding up the dial nice and smoothly with each wind. And this is particularly nice. I've never actually had a watch, believe it or not, despite all the watches I've owned, I've never actually had a watch with a power reserve indicator. And with an automatic watch, as you will know, they have a slipping mainspring, so you don't get that stop point where you've reached the maximum wind of your spring. It just reaches the end and it slips. Now, when you get used to winding them, you can feel the spring slip, but if you're new to automatic watches, it's actually quite handy so that you're not just winding and winding and winding and slipping the spring unnecessarily on the barrel wall, which will actually scrape it and cause problems. But can feel that getting tight and getting to the point of slipping now, and the mainspring reserve indicator is now, as you can see, pointing at the 40-hour mark, and that's a really, really nice feature. We're now going to go ahead and set the watch. The date is currently set to the 6th. Today is the 7th, and what I'm going to do, when I set the date on one of these watches, or well, when I set the date on any watch with a date, I always set it to the day before and then actually wind the watch around until it changes date to the appropriate date. Now this particular watch you wind clockwise to move the hands clockwise. Some watches go the opposite way. Now you see there that the date indicator has just gone over to the 7. I need to advance that through lunchtime, 12 o'clock, and round to 10:30, which is round about where we are. I will adjust that a little bit later. I'm actually going to set that to about 10:15. It is currently about 10:30 while I'm filming this, but just so it leaves the dial open and visible, and you can see what's going on. Now with the second hand, you can see it's stopped. Once I push that stem in, off it will go again and start ticking around the dial. So on the dial side, you've got a raised Seiko logo and raised indices at all of the valid points around the dial for the hour markers. You've got the power reserve indicator, Presage automatic, and the date window down here, and then of course the gorgeous coloured and textured dial. The case is a highly polished stainless steel. The crown is signed, as you can see there, with an S, a Seiko S logo. And moving over to the back, we can see limited edition. This is number 415 of 1000, which is kind of nice to know. It's nice that they've numbered them. And 4R57, which of course is the movement made in Japan, Seiko, water resistant 5-bar stainless steel. So stainless steel screw down case back with an exhibition case back window. The 4R57 movement, which, let me just swing the oscillating weight around, you can see the balance beating away nicely there. And you will notice, of course, if you're familiar with the 7S26 type movements, you will notice the similarities. It's got a nice sort of straight brush finish on, nothing too fancy, but nicely finished nonetheless, and a gold tone oscillating weight or rotor. This, of course, rotates with the wear and movement of the watch using the now famous Seiko magic fingers or Paul lever system. You can see the part of that system here with this little wheel with the dot on, and this is used for alignment purposes. You'll notice in that position the oscillating weight at the bottom, the dot lines up with the locating peg on the balance cock, and that's how you align these to get the optimum wind. I have actually made a video about that and about this setting and why that's important. If you want to look back through my videos, you'll find that one. And this is Seiko's very clever bi-directional winding system, using a minimal set of components as opposed to using 2 reversing wheels and an intermediate wheel, which you would typically find on a Swiss watch. Then the strap itself is a brown calf skin leather, branded Seiko, as you can see there, and leads up to a highly polished, very nice deployment clasp, which is also branded Seiko. It has a crocodile skin or alligator skin or whatever you would like to call that pattern design on the top, and it's a padded and it's very soft, supple leather. It's really, really nice. The deployment clasp uses a buckle either side to open, and is quite a complex but very nice design with a fold over clasp and then this that clips into place like so. Measurements. We always like to know measurements. We have a lug width of 20 millimeters. We have a case width of 39.5 millimeters, excluding the crown, and just about 44 millimeters including the crown. I'm being very careful because I'm trying not to scratch this beautiful polished stainless steel case, so I'm not clamping this these calipers down tight on any of these for obvious reasons. And then we have a lug to lug width of 46.9, just under 47 millimeters. And again, probably a little less, but as I say, I am being very, very careful with how I do that. And the strap that is supplied obviously is a 20 millimeter strap, which tapers at the tail end to about 17 millimeters. One measurement I did neglect to check, which I just have checked there, is just over 14 millimeters case thickness, including the raised crystal that you can see there. So quite thick, but not excessively so. And here finally is what the watch looks like on the wrist. As you can see, despite the thickness, it doesn't actually sit like you would expect a thick wristwatch to sit on the wrist. It has these nicely curved lugs which follow the shape of the wrist. I have a very thin wrist, as mentioned before previously in videos. And fortunately for me, I don't care that large bulky watches do look large and bulky on my thin wrist. Some people do, but despite the fairly large size of this watch, it doesn't actually wear like a big bulky watch, especially if you're used to divers with the thick bezels and such like. As you can see there, that's still quite elegant and doesn't particularly sit very highly. And I do have that ever so slightly loose because that's how I wear my watches. I don't like them clamped down really tight, and I hate them when they're worn sort of up past the wrist joint, like some people wear them up here. That's something my brother tends to do, and I just don't like that. I like them sort of down here on the wrist joint. I think that's where it just looks right to me. But yes, despite it being a fairly chunky watch, it's probably about the same kind of size as the Tourbillon that I reviewed recently, and yet it sits smaller on the wrist and looks very, very elegant. And that dial is no less beautiful on the wrist than it is when you first open the box and see it. The hands are just gorgeous. They're simple, but they reflect the light beautifully as you move that. The indices are all highly polished, and the seconds hand, again, very simple but very, very elegant. This whole thing is just a beautiful, beautiful watch. And anybody who is on the fence and considering buying one of these, I would highly recommend it and urge you to try and get one now while there are models new still available. Of course, some will come onto the second-hand market eventually, but of course there are limited numbers. It's a special edition. This bullhead, as you can see, is quite a small watch in comparison. It's actually a very small watch for a chronograph, and of course looks even smaller because the controls are up here on the top, which obviously giving it the bullhead moniker, and not on the side. And the Seiko, diameter wise, looks huge comparatively there, as you can see, but once it is on the wrist, as you just saw, just slip that into the keeper up there. And deployment clasps on leather straps are a little bit of a fiddle until you get used to them. But if you've got one or two, you get used to them very quickly. I do have a few watches with deployment clasps on leather straps. But yes, as I said, on the wrist, it doesn't wear that large and looks very, very elegant indeed. I am absolutely delighted with this. I certainly would recommend this from an initial preview. I don't have any particular concerns regarding the movement. This movement has been around a long time. It is a well-proven movement, and I'm sure it will be perfectly good. One last thing I would like to do, and what I always do with new watches when I get them, well, with old watches when I get them for that matter, to determine whether they are in need of a service, is to put it on the Timegrapher and let's see what kind of trace we get. A little tip here, when using a Timegrapher, some people wrap the clamp with tape, which is okay, but it can wear through because there are sharp edges, and it also means your watch can slip quite easily. Something I do with a nice shiny watch, and especially if I'm working on somebody's watch, servicing somebody's watch, and I want to protect it, is use a poly bag like this one and simply wrap the watch in that and place it in the Timegrapher like so. Now you'll notice this is placed in upside down. This is default position for me because usually I use the Timegrapher after a service, and you need to access the rear of the movement to make adjustments to the regulation. So I'm just used to placing the watch in upside down accordingly, and as I say, if you use a poly bag, that provides the protection that you need to prevent you scratching the case. And what I'm going to do here is try and unmount the camera and bring it over so we can see what's going on. As you can see, we have a VPH of 21,600, which is pretty much standard for Seiko. We've got a really nice clean trace, a beat error of 0.5 milliseconds, a nice strong amplitude of 297 degrees. That will be slightly off because I've not set the lift angle, and the lift angle, I suspect, although I may need to I will need to double check that, but most Seikos use a lift angle of 53 degrees. So I may be off on the lift angle, but nonetheless we've got a very nice healthy amplitude of 290 degrees. Seikos are typically beating at a much lower amplitude than Swiss watches would be. So we've got a plus 6 seconds, 0.5 millisecond beat error, which is something I normally would adjust, but I'm not going to open the case to adjust this on a brand new watch and compromise the seals with no good reason. So that's dial down, and now I'm going to move that to pendant down, and we've got a decrease in the beat error, and the rate is around about the same. It's a slight gain on the rate. It takes a little while for the beat error and such to adjust. There we go, 0.2 milliseconds plus 12. And we're going to move that into, let's move the strap out of the way, move that into a pendant right. And we have a lift angle which is about the same, the beat error which is about the same, and a very slight drop to make it similar to the dial down, which is plus 6 seconds per day, and finally into dial up. Pendant down, pendant right and dial up are the default positions that I adjust any watch to, unless somebody requests that it is checked and adjusted in other positions, in further positions, as you would with a certified chronometer, for example. There you can see the beat error is increased again to 0.4, 0.5 milliseconds, but the increase is about the same at +6 seconds a day. This means there's very little positional variance, which is good. That's always a good thing, and always more important than a little bit of variation in the beat error. So all in all, for a fresh first wound out of the box watch movement, I am absolutely delighted with it. And that brings us to the end of this overview of the Seiko Presage SSA401J1 Latte. Hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching, and check back for more watch videos including servicing in the future.